Welcome to Reimagined. I'm your host, Dr. Alex Swenson-Ridley, the founder of Emergent Women Coaching and a woman on a mission to help other heart-centered women leaders and entrepreneurs alter their experience of business and life from one of sacrifice and burnout to unadulterated joy and freedom. This is the show that gives you the inspiration and permission to break all the rules. We help you tap into your intuition, your zone of genius, and creativity to give you the confidence and clarity to do things differently. And we give you the tools and stories that will inspire you to rejuvenate your spirit, innovate how you lead and do business, strengthen your core identity, and connect deeply to yourself so that you emerge as the next powerful version of you. Ready to dive in? Let's go. As I'm recording this episode, we are on day 2 or 3 of not having any water. Our well decided to have a hissy fit after we'd gotten out of the cold snap we've had here in Alaska, where it was 40 below for several weeks. 40 below or colder. It's one of the coldest winters I've experienced up here in my 12 years. But our well decided to freeze somewhere, and we have to wait a few more days for someone to come thaw it out. And as I've been dealing with all this, of course, my husband is out of town because that is, how these things always happen, right? And I've just been reflecting on and processing while all of this has been going on. I also actually finished over the weekend a clinical certification for stress, anxiety, and emotional regulation through HeartMath. And HeartMath is something that I got trained in a couple of years ago, more from a trauma perspective, but I needed some continuing ed credits for my health coaching certification. So I was doing this and I'm really glad I did, because the course just reminded me of quite a bit and was eye-opening in a lot of ways into just what actually goes into decreasing stress and managing our stress better, and that it's actually possible to reset your stress baseline. Because for many of us, our baseline, we experience so much stress all of the time, right? And there was a time period in my life where this experience happening, especially with my husband being out of town, would have put me into a massive spiral of overwhelm and frustration and just like all the negative thinking and being frozen by the whole thing and like really dwelling in this space of stress and freak out, honestly, and not really being able to regulate myself well. And I'm not saying that I've cracked the code on this yet, but I've been utilizing HeartMath myself as just one of those tools that I use to help me be the best version of myself. And it's allowed me to have more resilience with these kind of moments, because rather than freaking out, I had my husband share the number of our plumber, because I don't know who the guy is. I moved into my husband's house, right? And he came last night and, we did some stuff, and I know how to do fuse boxes, and, he showed me some things. And then today it still wasn't thawed. So rather than freaking out, I called around to all the thawing places and got on someone's schedule and another place's call list. And hopefully someone will get to us before Wednesday, but that's when they said they could come. And I bought water so we can flush toilets and, do that and have drinking water available and all that stuff. And it hasn't been a big deal. And I share this story just as a real time, real world example, because I'm going through it right now. But for each of you who's listening to this, to just look at, what is your capacity for the things that life throws at us, right? Because we have our normal day-to-day stuff. And I remember very clearly a time in my chiropractic practice where I was stretched so thin and had so many balls in the air and had so many fires I was constantly putting out at work and at home and all these other things, that if one more thing got added to my plate, it put me into complete shutdown. And what that actually is from a physiological standpoint is, I would get sick. I would hide on the couch and not deal with anything and just veg out watching movies. And there's nothing wrong with that per se. You just want to look at what is your capacity and how flexible are you in your stress response. And this is what gets really cool, because it's not that we're stuck in that way forever, right? For a lot of us, especially those of you listening who are, I'm assuming you're all women, whether you own your own business or not, we all put so much on our plate all the time. And it can and does affect our stress baseline. And so what's really interesting about this is when you start to reset it, and the big way that I've learned to do this is actually through heart rate variability biofeedback, which I'm not going to get into a bunch of science with you guys on what all that means, but we can start to retrain our system to have more flexibility within our stress response. Because when we're just constantly living in stress, 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 A, we don't often realize that we are because that's just what feels normal to us. And B, that's what feels normal to us. So even if you remove yourself from those stressors, your system will still find a reason to feel stress. And I have experienced this, especially when I transitioned out of having my brick and mortar practice and just being at home and, working online. And the last year, really honestly, not actually working all that much, like really giving myself a break. I will still have days where I feel stressed and I feel anxious, and there's no logical reason or explanation for it that I can come up with. But as I was going through the certification, I was like, oh, that makes sense. Because that's just the baseline that my body's used to. And I've also now had the experience of having, non-stressful days, days where I'm actually in more of a rejuvenated state and, building resilience in that way. And so I notice it more. I'm like, oh, my chest is tight. My breathing's getting difficult. My heart rate is just high. I wear an Aura ring that tracks all this and now measures daytime stress, which is really cool because it's also, they just released this part where it'll give you a resilience reading for the day, kind of based on your heart rate variability and how much you're recovering and all of this stuff. And it's very cool. And so we want to have this flexibility in both our stress response and how our heart rate and our emotions respond to that, and have the ability to self-regulate. And part of that is actually recognizing and realizing when we are in stress. And a lot of that comes down to an emotional connection. And this is where HeartMath comes in. We can all do deep breathing. And this is one of the things I struggled with so much when I knew I was highly stressed and that it was impacting my health. They've now shown in the literature, countless times that high stress is the precursor to a lot of disease, to really, having poor health, to experiencing not fun things down the road, and that it, can be an underlying cause of like resistance to losing weight, something so many women that listen to this show struggle with. I know, because I have also been one of them, and I still am carrying around what I know is stress rate weight because I'm still working through resetting this for myself. And, autoimmune diseases, low energy, like all of this stuff is actually tied to our ability to self-regulate and our capacity and resilience in the midst of what life throws at us. So what do you do with all this? The key and the access actually lies in something that I have become mildly obsessed with, which is the concept of getting out of your head and reconnecting to your body. And so HeartMath has shown that doing that through the heart. So focusing, I shared on Instagram, and every Thursday I'm doing kind of a short little tip on how you actually get out of your head. And I'm calling it Body Connect Thursdays. So if we're not connected there, follow me there. I decided to do this on Instagram for whatever reason, but that's where it's happening. Body Connect Thursdays. So I shared heart focused breathing, which is where I'll just kind of explain it, and you can do it along with me if you want, but you focus on the area of the heart. And some of you, it might be hard to get there. Like you might be so disconnected, you don't even know what that feels like, what that looks. You can put your hand over your heart if that feels good. For most people it does, some it doesn't, and that's totally fine. But the idea is you want to focus on something in your body. And if it's hard to get there, then check in with your five senses. What do you see? What do you smell? What do you taste? Give yourself some gentle touch. I'm missing one, but you check in with all five of those senses. What do you hear? That was the other one. And then try to connect into your heart. And as you're focusing on your heart, you just breathe a little more slowly and a little more deeply than usual. They've shown through research that counts of 5, so 5 in, 5 out, actually has some clinical significance in interrupting a stress response and pattern. And when you do that, the next piece of this is to actually bring in an emotion of love, appreciation, joy, care, like a memory of, or a person or something. Like I've had women use thinking about like nursing their kids way back in the day, if it's been a while, or even recently if you're younger, and just, that moment where there's that love and just joy in that moment. So you want to bring one of those and just try to hold that emotion in your heart. And when you do this, they've shown through a bunch of research and things now that it can actually reset your baseline for stress. And so it's not about changing anything in your life. Certainly, we want to reduce those instances where we're suddenly thrown into high stress situations, especially if they're not safe. But a lot of us with work and with all of that, we don't necessarily have control over changing our circumstances immediately. Maybe you do. Maybe you don't. Maybe you have the courage and make that leap, or have come to the point where like you gotta change, and that's cool. And that's also scary. And so this applies in that. And it also applies in staying there. And these are some of the tools and things I wish I had had when I had my practice, because I think I would have responded differently as a boss, as a mom, as a doctor, and with my patients. I would have been more tapped into my creativity and my intuition, and just been more connected with myself in a way that would have made a big difference and shift there. And that's what's on the other side of doing this practice regularly. The hard part of it is that it requires intentionality. It requires you to do something differently, which is to actually disconnect and connect. Well, disconnect from your brain and your thoughts, I would say, and connect instead in your body. And it takes a little bit of time. When I first started doing HeartMath consistently and regularly, again, I've shared this in a few places. It was in the fall after I had ankle surgery, and I suddenly had some more time on my hands. And my heart rate variability tends to, quite frankly, suck. And you can look up what normative ranges are for your age, but they find that people who are low for their age, and it does, like, we lose variability. And so what heart rate variability is just how high your heart goes and how low it goes, and the change over time. And we actually want greater flexibility there. So the greater that rate of variability, the healthier you are, and the easier you can respond to stress, and the better regulated your system and your body is. The lower that is, you may still feel healthy, but you're moving towards having potentially a lot of health issues, which I have had the experience of having come true recently. And my heart rate variability tends to be really low, like in the 20s, which is terrible. I think I'm 39, almost 40. So for a 40-year-old, like the average is somewhere around 65 for heart rate variability. This is not your heart rate, but your variability in your rate. So think tools like the Aura Ring track this. HeartMath also has some things where you can actually look at this. And then what you're trying to do when you're connecting with your heart, it helps bring your brain and your body into a state of coherence. And so coherence is like, if you think of metronomes, there's videos of this online, but they will sync up if they're all going different directions and speeds and tempos and all of that. Over time, they get into sync and they all start moving together. And this is what happens in our bodies. So if you think about, just we're all energy, and we have electrical flows and all these things happening in our body. And the heart is actually a big epicenter for that. It's almost like its own brain in how it responds to emotions, and it's what feels those. And so emotions actually live more in the heart, and they influence the brain, and they influence hormones, and they influence all this stuff in our body. And if we never connect there, and we tend to be in this state of chaos with the metronomes all going different speeds and directions and all the things, rather than a state of coherence. And so as we start to train ourselves to get back into that state of coherence, we develop more flexibility and emotional regulation. And we don't have the moments where, maybe we get set off, or you're so on at work all day that you're just a bear to your family at night. This is something that I've been seeing with my husband. Love him to death, as he stepped into a new job with a lot of stress and a lot of pressure. Is we don't always get his best self at home. He mostly does a good job, but these are things that I'm going to start gently working with him on as well, because it helps us just show up in the world in a better way, and in the way we want to. So many women I talk to, we are frustrated with ourselves, or feel like a terrible mom or a terrible person with our families, because we just don't have the capacity for that. I experienced this with one of my stepsons. Like, he can be, I'm looking for the right word. He can just be a lot, right? Like he's very good at manipulative stuff and half truths, and he can just be difficult to talk with and connect with. And I love him. He's a super great kid and lots of fun and very social and very like I enjoy that. But early on in my marriage to my husband, as I was getting to know everybody, blending families takes a while. I think we're just kind of getting to the point 5.5 years of sort of getting there, and they're getting older, but we didn't have a great relationship because I was going through all the stuff in my practice with, you know, payments not coming in and not being able to support staff. And I had all this stuff going on, and I didn't have the capacity at home to also really show up and try to get to know them in a deep way. And it definitely has affected our journey so far as, stepmom, stepson, whatever labels we want to give it, but I guess that's what it is. And just reflecting on that, and I know a lot of us have these instances in life, and what I love about all of this is that I now feel like, well, I know I have this tool, and we all have the ability to do this, biofeedback with ourselves at home. There's lots of like technology that's available in rings and watches and other devices that measure HRV, where you can start to see and impact that response in your body, that I think is really cool. So why am I sharing all of this? What does this mean? Like going through this weekend, and I also revisited some of the trauma training that I had done because it can be a little different. And for women who have either experienced burnout or trauma or both, pretty much all of us have experienced some level of those. Burnout and trauma, and just you can be traumatized by having high levels of stress for a long time, and just your system hits a capacity, right? It's our sympathetic response. And so in that response, our body's like, I have to run away from the bear is trying to chase me and eat me. It doesn't know that that's due to traffic or due to a work day or due to something going on with your business. It has no differentiation for that, but at some point your system will reach max capacity. And when that happens, it actually goes into shutdown, which is known as freeze. And freeze is also the trauma response. And so we essentially go numb. We probably don't feel anything at all anymore. You don't really have connection to your emotions. And that is more of a hypo regulated state. And this is where my body and my HRV and my heart rate do tend to still be, even after a lot of work that I've been doing. And so I'm bringing a lot of intentionality for myself and in the work that I'm doing with other women now to really start to impact that and bring your system back online. And it's almost, I mean, it feels like this injury that we go through both emotionally and physically that you don't necessarily know how to navigate or even realize is happening to you. Like we can live in freeze for a very long time. So if you're listening to this and you connect with or recognize in yourself any of these things, I want to connect with you. I'm putting together, that's going to launch in March, a new, as a group, a small group program where we're actually going to, I'm calling it the shift, and we're going to spend 8 weeks working through the steps to actually shift that baseline and bring it online and give you the tools and like the habits to continue that. I can't guarantee that you're going to completely change your stress baseline in that amount of time. Research has shown more like 16 weeks, but in terms of getting a really good foundational start and having the encouragement, and then we're going to create some sort of accountability process to keep it going, because part of this is that you have to show up and actually do the work, which can make it harder. So if you're someone who's willing to do that and you recognize yourself in this, and you're committed to living a long and healthy and happy life, like this is the key that not enough of us talk about, know about, any of those things. So all that to say, I want to connect with you, hear from you, whether it's on social media or you send me an email, dralex@emergentwomencoaching.com. Let's connect and just talk and give you kind of an idea of where your baseline is. There's somewhat simple ways that we can actually just track this, especially if you have your own technology that does heart rate variability, like in a time period, then we can just look at it and see where your baseline's at and help you decide if making a plan to change that would be a good idea. And if you don't need that kind of data and you just know, like, hey, I'm sure I suck at this. I know that. And not to, shame you or guilt you or any of that. Just like, that your body is struggling and doesn't have stress flexibility and capacity and resilience or regulation in the way that it should. And it's starting to affect your health. Like, talk. I'm still planning this thing. I'm just announcing it today. I'm going to start talking about it, but there'll be a lot more information coming out. So shoot me an email, connect with me on social media, and just let me know that you're interested in this conversation. I am interested in this conversation. I think it's really, really great. And start just experimenting with this for yourself. I gave you the first tool. So anytime you're feeling stressed, and really you should just start practicing that heart focused breathing. And then quick coherence is where you bring in the renewing emotions. So something that brings you love, joy, happiness. And what's cool about that emotion and specifically is what starts to make this shift. And it can actually take you out of cortisol response and increase your DHEA, which is the precursor for all of our hormones. So for those of you who are in that stage of life where there's hormonal changes and all of that coming, this is a huge key to navigating that successfully and happily and all of that. So with that, I think that's all I wanted to say on these things for today, but I hope this serves you. I am very excited about this. The only other thing I was going to add is, I think I forgot to say, when I started consistently utilizing HeartMath again, which heart focused breathing and quick coherence that we just talked about are two techniques that are driven by that, my resting heart rate dropped by about 6 beats per minute. So it went under 60 beats per minute for the first time in like years. And my HRV, the average actually did come up pretty quickly to more like 30 to 40 instead of 20 to 30. And obviously, I still have work to do there to get to more of what the normal is for my age range. But I saw significant change within 3 days, right? The trick is that you have to be consistent. And when we have that data, it can be fueling and help you be excited about it all. But just know that you can start to see a change fairly quickly. And hopefully that motivates you to continue practicing. So with that, a couple of things. One, if you haven't joined me on our off social media group, I'm going to be doing more kind of just fun stuff related to all of this in there. So go to jointherise.co and you can join there. It's free. It's just off of Facebook because that's one of those things that bothers me. I'll just go with that. I needed a break, so I wanted to build a community there. I haven't been super active in there because we're still growing, but I'm going to start showing up and doing like our Body Connect Thursdays will also be in there if you just really hate social media, but still want access to that. And we have a book club that we're going to start. We're starting next week. We're reading The Science of Stuck. I will be summarizing it, so you don't even have to read it. Just be in the group to be there. There's great summaries in there, and that book gets into talking about stress, emotional regulation, anxiety, and some other stuff as well. That's really helpful and cool. And there's just more happening in there. So go to jointherise.co, and I will see you in there. And otherwise, just connect with me either on social media or shoot me an email, dralex@emergentwomencoaching.com. Let me know what questions you have. I would be happy to help you do a baseline assessment of just where your stress base is and what your, abilities are, your capacity and your regulation in there, and also answer any questions that you have. So with that, we will see you next week.
Thanks so much for tuning into the show. I have a small request. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. This is a huge help to us on our quest to reach even more women around the world. Finally, if you're searching for a free community of women on a similar journey to you, I'd like to invite you to join me inside the free Rise community, hosted off of social media on Circle. Here you'll find connection with other women in a safe and loving space, a weekly book club, live events designed to deepen your inner work journey, and additional resources to support your growth. Visit www.jointherise.co or simply click on the link in the show notes to join me. Until next time, remember to honor and love yourself in each moment, embrace the challenges life throws at you, and continue rising.